let's go ahead and get started by, okay, yes. So today is going to be an evolution check-in. What comes next, right? What are we going to be doing with some of the stuff that I'm asking you to do in the class? Because some people I know have been sitting there thinking to themselves, do I really have to do this? Or why are we doing this? Or what's the purpose of this? So I'm answering all your whys today. We will discuss and review evidence for evolution. Also, I know some of you did not go through that lesson. So we're going to talk about that stuff. And then we're going to discuss and potentially review for some of you, like Bonnie, you've already done it, the Population Dynamics Lab Part 1, what that means, what Part 2 and 3 are going to be. Of course, we got scheduled for a a staff training next Tuesday during this virtual session. So we're not going to be having a virtual session next Tuesday. When I was planning to do Population Dynamics Part 2 and 3, well, I can't do it today because you guys haven't done Part 1, right? So it's kind of putting us in a little bit of a pickle, which we will easily weasel our way out of / eat because I like eating pickles. All right, warm up. Multiple questions, a lot of thinking for you. Which piece of evidence from lesson 3, not from your mind, was the most compelling for you? Oh, that's right, Alexis turned it in too. Proud of you guys. You guys are gonna like parts 2 and 3, it's fun. We're gonna talk about that, Georgia. So, which piece of evidence was most compelling for you? Fossils, DNA, some other thing, one of those things. And then, second question, evolution has a negative connotation, right? Most people hear the word and they're like, oh, that's not good. Or they think it's like something intense, right? Why do you think that is? And after learning about the evidence and whatnot, do you still think it's such a taboo topic? So those are your 2 questions right now that you're thinking about. You could type your answer to all of them at once. You could type it in parts, however you're feeling like doing that. And if you have questions that you already know you have, like Georgia just typed in the chat one of her questions, so I'm going to write that down so that I do not forget to answer it. Okay. All right. Fossils. I thought that the fossil evidence in comparative anatomy were the most compelling. Yes, biogeographical. Ooh, nice. Yeah, that one's kind of a hard one to understand at first. Is your video working, Colin? Maybe. Yes, it is. Congratulations. Okay. What we're doing, by the way, for those of you that just came in, is we're talking about which evidence for evolution seemed the most compelling, or, you know, like, oh, this seems like a pretty good reason to believe and or at least have some people believe in evolution. Because remember, the purpose of this is not for me to convince you to believe. I personally really don't care what you believe. What I do care about, though, is that you know what it is, right? Because then you can agree with it or disagree. I don't care, but at least you know what it is and you don't have these misconceptions or false understandings that are perpetuating your beliefs, right? Which is what ends up happening is people are like, evolution's evil. And then you're like, oh, what part do you think is bad? Oh, like the whole part. Like, what? That's what people do when they argue about this. You'll see. It's disturbing. Or they say, it's against my religion. And you say, oh, how is it against your religion? Well, it just is. Okay. So at least now you could say why, if you really do think that, right? All right. Let's see. DNA for me, and I still say it's kind of bad to at least bring it up in a conversation because some people don't believe. Yeah, maybe not like Thanksgiving conversation, right? Evolution has always made sense to me, but this was an awesome lesson. I also like the archaeological evidence. Yes. Fossils and DNA. I'm with Bonnie. I'd say we should get shirts that say I'm with Bonnie. That would be cute shirt. I'd say the fossils are the most convincing evidence as it shows the slow progression over time, for sure, right? And you can really see, like, some organisms just disappear from the fossil record, right? And you're like, huh, I wonder what happened there. Gives you a lot of questions, too. Some people may be scared of evolution because of the fact that it says evolution did not intentionally create humans. Yeah, the fact that it has no goal, that's hard for us to understand, Because is it even possible, even if you're like, I'm just going to wander around, can you truly say that you have no goal? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to imagine what that's like to have no goals. I don't understand why it's taboo to some when there's so much evidence. True, right? Fossils are most compelling because it shows a real thing. I think it has a bad name because most people don't understand it. Yeah, right? People just have this vague idea, or they think it's about evolving from monkeys, right? That's the biggest one that you hear. You don't want to see me argue with adults about that. I would say evolution because I thought it was going to be like simple, like Pokemon. Yeah, and so a lot of people have said that too in their writing. Oh, I thought it was going to be like Pokemon, right? Where all of a sudden, like an animal just got wings and starts flying. And it's not like that. Similar-ish, right? Let's see. I think it has a bad name because of the negative publicity from Christian leaders, for sure. The war on evolution, we can call it. I think that evolution is super interesting, and I think that there's a bad connotation around evolution because people either don't understand it or are scared. Yeah, that we weren't created to be the apex. True, right? We view ourselves as the apex, the top of the food chain, the most advanced, right? Maybe you don't view that personally, but most people think that, right? Kylie, it's because some people believe God made every animal perfectly, and evolution says that isn't true. Yeah, right? So a lot of times I get asked, is it possible for you to be religious and also believe in evolution? And the answer is, of course it's possible, right? This is your mind. You know, you can figure out if that makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, it does, right? That's all I can tell you. But there are hundreds of thousands of scientists who are Christians, right? Or Muslims, or they're Jewish, or they're any other religion, and they still support this, right? So they are not mutually exclusive. Just because you believe in God does not mean that you can't believe in this. And I think that's where a lot of the problem comes in. People think it has to be one or the other. It doesn't, right? It's not that black and white. Now, does that mean that you can believe in evolution and not believe in God, or vice versa, believe in God and not believe in evolution? Of course, right? But you can also believe in both. So don't think that you're going against God or going against your religion because you believe this or you think it's interesting, right? Or you go, oh, I can see some evidence here, okay, right? That doesn't mean anything about your religion. In fact, I encourage you, if you are religious, talk to people in your church. Do you believe in this? And if you do, how do you believe in it, right? And if they say they don't, then they don't, and that's fine. Don't push it on them. But people are going to be willing to talk to you about those types of things, right? Maybe how they've fitted into their beliefs or whatever. Okay, so why isn't this going to the next slide? Oh, was this the only slide I did? Maybe it was. Okay, so then from here, it was the last slide. I'm just going to quickly go to the evidence section, right? If you have not watched this whale video, it is amazing. One of the best videos that I've ever seen, mostly because they go through all the evidence, right? They talk about the different categories, and this is literally the tip of the iceberg for whales, right? Whales are really heavily studied in evolution because there's a lot of fossils, and you can really see the change, sort of what Colin was referencing before, right? You can see that the legs got smaller. You can see that the legs went away, right? Whoa, whales were on land, then they went in water, or they were on water, then they went in land, or they did both, or what did they do, right? It brings up all of these questions for you, which is great, because a part of science is that we don't know everything, and evolution is one of the hardest things to study, right? So you guys are going to notice that as we go through this. Modeling evolution is really hard. Why? Because we're talking about tiny changes over thousands and millions of years. We're talking about something that doesn't have a goal, which again is very hard for us. No, there must be a goal. There's not. Right? Another interesting thing that you can study if you are interested in this, I linked that additional research, like a long Word document. I think I just copy pasted that from somewhere many, many years ago. There's a lot of interesting evidence like that, right? Even the emergence of eyes, right? So the way that our eye works is very specific. Well, in multiple trees of evolution, the eye has appeared, but it didn't all come from the same ancestor. Right? And that's very interesting information right there, because you think, well, it should have just been one ancestor that then became all these other things, but that's not how it worked, right? The eye appeared multiple times throughout the history of organisms, independently of other organisms. That's crazy, right? So there's a lot of different things like that where you might have some of your questions answered, but you'll probably just have more questions. The other takeaway from this lesson is these trees, right? You're going to start seeing a lot of these phylogenetic trees. And they are trees, right? But really what's important about them is that they tell you how these organisms have evolved. The more closely organisms are on the branches, the more closely related they are. So for example, the primate is most closely related to a rodent or rabbit, right, versus to a shark. Dinosaurs and birds are more closely related to crocodiles than they are to the rodent or the rabbit, right? So the closer they are on the tree, the more closely related they are, which is a great visual. These things are really hard to make because you have to figure out what these traits are that got lost or gained. There's also many ways to make them. There's not necessarily a right way. Anyways, that's an important takeaway from this. So, what was I going through to do now? Oh yeah, we're talking about population dynamics. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, now that you have a pretty good understanding, what is evolution, what's the evidence for it, what is it not, and sort of how it works, right? A lot of you guys had some great examples that you came up with of a population and how it would be influenced by natural selection, right? Natural selection is important because it's the mechanism that controls evolution, right? So they are different things, but they're related, right? Natural selection causes evolution to happen, but they're not necessarily the same exact thing. All right. So what's happening next is I'm actually going to have you guys learn through some activities that modeling this process is really freaking hard. In fact, it might even make you think, whoa, this seems weird that we can't model it. Why? Because, oh, this is chemistry. There's so many factors. So let's see if we can get a list going in the chat. What are some things that contribute to evolution? For example, traits is something that you could list, like that organisms have. Predators, food, right? Those kinds of things. Let's see some listing in the chat. Locations, limbs, sure. Right, like the changing of them or differences in the limbs. The environment, which we could break down into a lot of things. Weather, disease, access to water, access to food, habitat, access to shelter, number of predators, number of other organisms that you're competing with, pollution, disease. We could go on and on and on. Bad luck, right? It's true. You could be the greatest deer of all time that can run at super speeds and a tree falls on you and kills you. That's the end. Hunting, great one. Global changes, sure. Food, animal, oh yeah, personality, right? Are you a risk taker? Maybe you're dying quicker. What's desirable for that animal in breeding? So sexual selection. Yeah, you might have great traits, but maybe you look really ugly and other animals don't want to mate with you, right? There's all sorts of stuff. Human intervention and interaction, of course, a huge one. Destruction of habitat, yes. I think we'll do that later. I'm pretty sure I put that in this semester. We're going to do an activity with that, like how humans think that we can control ecosystems. Well, guess what? We can't, right? Even though we think we can. See how well that goes for us. Not well. Anyway, there's a million things that contribute to this. So what we're going to do is there's this population dynamics lab part 1 that you need to do. Yeah, we try. Well, see, here's our thing. We try and then we realize all the things that went wrong. So then we try to fix those things and then it just spirals into craziness. All right, so I might even have data in here. I hope I don't. I realized earlier in chemistry that I wanted them to try this question and I didn't erase the how to do it. So I was like, guys, try to set this up. And the whole thing was just right there. So I have to make sure sometimes that I erase stuff. Okay, so this is what you're looking at when you open this, right? Dynamic of predators and prey. So what does that mean, right? What is the relationship between predator and prey? This is like 6th grade science level of difficulty. The prey eats the predator. Wait, no. Wrong way. Other way, yeah. The predator eats the prey. Good, right? So what's the relationship? The relationship is there are probably less predators, right? If you have one predator, they're going to need a certain number of prey to eat. Food chains, exactly. There could be multiple predators. There could be one, like maybe 5 different things eat you, right? Versus only one, etc. Right? So there's going to be a chain of food and relationships, and there's dynamics between this. And a lot of this is common sense to us, right? Yeah, if the wolf doesn't have food, it's going to die. Okay. Duh. Right? However, it's not that simple, as we just expressed, because there are many other factors that could cause the wolf to die or not be able to get food or get too much food or whatever. So this lab is kind of getting at that idea. What you're going to need to do in order to complete this lab is print off this game board in color. The color are important. The colors are important. I'm really tired too, Colin, so I'm having a hard time speaking. The colors are important. If you do it in black and white and you can tell the difference between the white, the light blue, and the dark blue, that's totally fine, right? As long as you can tell the difference. But the colors are there for a reason. Like, it's not just there to look pretty, right? Because that's what the directions tell you is about by color. Another thing you might also do is there's no reason that if you have like a tablet or something like that, you couldn't take a picture of this, put it on a table, and there you go. So you don't necessarily have to print it if you have another way that you could view it and touch it. So why do you need this game board, right? Well, there's these complicated directions. Now, as you're reading the directions and doing this lab, as Bonnie and Alexis have already done, a few of you have also possibly done already, the directions are not perfect, right? That's on purpose. That's part of the activity. So we're going to go through the directions because I get a lot of questions about this because they are a little confusing. If you did it already, you're going to listen and make sure that you did it correctly, okay? So be thinking about what you did for this. If you did it correctly, great. If you didn't, you're going to get to revise. It shouldn't take you too long. So this game board represents the environment. The light colored beans represent rabbits and the darker colored beans represent foxes. So Georgia asked a great question earlier. What if I don't have beans? Great. Do you have 2 things of multiple colors that you have 25 pieces of? That's what you're using. You could use Cheerios and bow tie pastas, whatever you have. All you need is 2 different objects that are different colors that you can differentiate between. Doesn't have to be beans. The bean just represents the organism, right? So you could use anything that you have. You could even cut up little pieces of paper if you don't have anything else and have like little pieces of blue paper or this and little pieces of pink paper or this, right? That part, you could use Legos. Exactly, right? So the pieces, what they are themselves are not important. It's what they're representing. So as long as you know what you're representing, that's fine. If you use beans, then you'll do exactly as this says. Light colored beans are rabbits, dark beans are foxes. Acquire 15 rabbits and 15 foxes to start the game. Immediately you should be thinking, is that realistic that you would have the exact same number of rabbits and foxes in an environment to start? So keep that in mind as we go. Mix the rabbits and foxes together thoroughly. You're literally going to dump them on a piece of paper, mix them up so that they're all scattered everywhere. And place them randomly on any square on the game board. So you're just going to push your little pieces into individual squares. Again, you're not like trying to put them in a certain one. You just go do-do-do-do until they're in their own square. Okay. After every bean or piece, Lego, whatever you're using, is in a square by itself, then you do the following. If a rabbit is on a dark blue square, it gives birth. So you add a new rabbit to that same square. So your rabbits are light colored beans, right? So let's say that we have a rabbit chilling on this blue square, dark blue square. It would give birth just to 1 rabbit. Again, in your mind, you should think, do rabbits only have 1 baby? If a fox lands in the same patch of 4 squares, that's what the green border's for, with a rabbit, then 1 rabbit is eaten by each fox. So you had your rabbit here that gave birth. Well, you might also have a fox that eats that rabbit, and then you only have one rabbit left. The order in which you do this, you could have the rabbit give birth first, then get eaten. That's probably the easiest way to do it, because then you won't run out of rabbits as quickly. Okay, if a fox lands on a white square, it dies. Who knows why? It just died. You move it away permanently from the game. Then you count all the foxes and rabbits that you have at the end of all three of those things, and you put it, oh, I missed a step, I'm sorry. You guys should have told me the foxes have babies too. Each full-bellied fox, so every single fox that ate a rabbit gives birth to a new fox. So in our example, in fact, you know what? I could color on this thing. This is going to be fun. Okay. In our example, let's say we have a little brown rabbit. Isn't he beautiful? Or she, because she's going to give birth. And we also have, yes, this is complicated. That's why we're going over it, Lane. We also have our wolf, who's going to be black. And he's over here. So this is how we would have started. We spread out all of our beans onto our board. Again, the colors of the beans don't matter as long as you know which one's which. In this case, brown's rabbits, black's wolves. So I follow my steps. If a rabbit lands on a dark blue square, it gives birth. Okay, my rabbit over here is going to give birth to a little baby rabbit. Step 2, if a fox lands in the same patch of 4 squares outlined by the green border with a rabbit, then one rabbit is eaten by each fox. Goodbye. Each full-bellied fox then gives birth to a new fox. Oh, whoops. I was like, what happened to my circle? I changed to a different shape. There we go. My fox gave birth. And if a fox lands on a white square, it dies. Oh, well, that fox landed on a white square, so it died, but its baby still survives. So now I would be left with one fox and one rabbit. I count them, I put them in the data table, then I repeat. Now, do I start with 15 rabbits and 15 foxes again in round 2? No, I just stay with what I have. So what's going to happen if you do this correctly is what? What's going to happen, especially those of you who've done it already? Am I going to be able to make it all the way to generation 15? Maybe. That's perfectly put from Stella. Maybe. Most likely your rabbits will die off early on and that's it. Right? Depending on how everything lands, right? Of course, you might make it to generation 15. Let's say you make it to generation 9 and you have 0 rabbits. Well, then you're done. All the foxes are going to die at that point because they can't eat anything. So it's going to be an imperfect game. The rules are complicated, right? But again, this is modeling a predator-prey relationship and attempting to create some realistic scenarios here, right? That they give birth, they eat, they can die randomly for unknown causes, whatever. The first part of your task here is that you just do this. Shouldn't take you long. Once you have your pieces, you could probably in 20 minutes do this whole thing and get all the way to 15 generations or however quickly your rabbits die. That's the easy part. So usually then in next week's virtual session, I would go through how to do parts 2 and 3 and what that means. However, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm going to be at a training. I'd rather be at the virtual session. No, I'm just kidding. I like trainings, but they always seem to be planned during my virtual sessions. So I'm going to tell you guys about what you're going to do in Population Dynamic Lab Part 2 and 3. And I'm going to leave my video that I recorded last year, which is right here. It's already in there, explaining all the stuff and showing it and talking about people's data and what it means. So definitely watch that video. You could watch it today, you could watch it next week, you could do it during the virtual session time, whatever you want to do. But watch the video so that you get a thorough explanation of how to do this. Because what you're going to do is ignore all the graphs. Okay, is this game realistic? In your mind, as you did the game, you should have been thinking, not really. Rabbits have a lot of babies. Where's climate? Where's other things in the environment? Can't rabbits hide? Aren't there multiple colors of rabbits? Millions of reasons why it's not realistic. Well, great, because you're going to change it. So you're going to do this game 2 more times. However, you're going to make altercations to the game to make it better. Yep, you're right, Colin. And it isn't the most realistic, right? And the point is, hopefully, I created it so that you would say, this doesn't seem realistic, because it's not. So what you're going to do is in part 2, you're going to make one modification to the game, to the instructions. So you're going to make a copy of the lab. You're going to change the instructions based on the principle of natural selection. So how can you make this game more realistic to the process of evolution and natural selection? You are changing one thing. It's going to kill you. You're going to want to rewrite the entire thing. No. Why are we only changing one? Somebody's going to tell me the answer to it because I know you know it. Yeah, foxes don't get impregnated by eating. Exactly, right? Evolution slow. Yes. But also, guys, how are we going to know what worked if we change 17 things and you get really great data? Well, how do you know which one of those things made the data better, right? It's like a variable. If you're going to change something, you want to change 1, maybe 2 things at a time, depending on the situation. In this case, it's 1. So that you can say, that did make it more realistic. Or, that did nothing, oh well. Right? So we're going to change 1 thing at a time. It's going to be hard for you. You're going to have to really choose what is the one thing that you want to change that you think that would make this more realistic. Some examples here are you could have different colored rabbits. Maybe you have white rabbits and brown rabbits, and the brown ones are more likely to get eaten because they stick out, right? This is your creative world here. You can have whatever environment you want. Maybe one blends in better. Maybe you have polka dotted rabbits and they can become invisible, right? Whatever. Think of something you can do that would make this more like natural selection. In other words, you need more than one trait so that natural selection can act on your variations. If that wasn't enough, then you're going to do this again. Oh, yes. Where you're scratching that idea. You're starting over from original lab, make a copy of it. This time, you're going to make a modification that makes the game more realistic based on anything that you want. So it could be that rabbits have more than one baby. So maybe in your game, you know, anytime a rabbit has a baby, it actually has 10 babies. Maybe the wolf can't get impregnated unless it's near another wolf. Maybe every 5 generations, there's a hurricane and 50% of everything dies. You could create anything here that you think will make it more realistic. And yes, Cullen, this is complicated is exactly how you should be feeling. It is. So, you can do a lot of different things, and people did these things last year that I mentioned as examples. Some people came up with other examples of things that were even better, maybe. But you want to keep it simple enough that you can rewrite the game so that I could read it and say, oh, I know what you did here. You're adding white beans and brown beans. You put polka dots on some of your rabbits. You did this, right? So it should be able to be understood by everyone, not just you. Then, of course, that's not all you're going to do, because why would that be all? I should probably change the due date on this, though, because I think it's due on a different date, not March 23rd. But what you're going to be doing is then reflecting and answering some reflection questions on whether your game actually was more realistic, how you know that, right? For example, maybe your rabbits all died off in generation 5, and with the modification you made, they go all the way to generation 15. and you say, actually, it looks more realistic. There's like 15 rabbits alive at the end. That seems way better than it was. And really what I want you to understand about this is that this is complicated, and it's really complicated to model evolution. It's very hard to model because of all of these things that you guys are bringing up, and the fact that it's almost impossible to get every single thing that influences evolution happening at once. Okay, so watch this video next week. That's going to be your assignment during the virtual session. I will, of course, email you and remind you of all this stuff because I know you're going to forget. I'm going to change the due date on this. It is not March 23rd. Remember that statistics unit that you guys did last semester? Well, last year people had to do that in this semester. So it took us longer to get through all this stuff. But the population dynamics, part 2 and 3, it's due March 12th. So only 2 weeks away from where it was originally stated. If you go in the actual assignment, right, it has all the directions again, has what you turn in, and it has the conclusion and analysis questions. There's a rubric for how you're going to be graded, so you can see exactly what you need to do. And again, the video is linked here. I'll go ahead and paste this in the chat for those of you who want to have that open already because you want to be thinking about it. Okay, so would every generation you pull a random card that's like a natural disaster? Yeah, that would count. Yeah, so you could add other things, like maybe you have cards that are getting added in, and if it's a blue card, you know, some things die, and if it's a green card, other things die. Again, this is, let your creativity run wild here. It doesn't have to be, you know, realistic in terms of nature necessarily, but realistic in terms of how a population would change over time. It'll probably be easier if you model it after nature though, just saying. Okay, so that's a lot because that's what I was gonna spend the entire virtual session next week talking about, which obviously I'm not gonna be able to do. So you're gonna watch the video and you're gonna start working on this stuff. We will check in about this again in the first virtual session in March to make sure everyone's good on it. So write your questions down as you go through it. Right, feel free to email me, especially if you're like, wow, does this modification seem realistic? It might. I'm happy to tell you based on the one time that I've done this and what I've seen people do and how it worked. Okay, so yeah, that's what's coming up. It's complicated. But this is what real scientists try to do, is we want to set up a model of evolution. Well, why would we want to set up a model? So that we can study it, right? And so we can predict things. How are these things changing over time? When you get to the bacterial resistance lesson, right, that's really, I think, going to speak to a lot of you guys. Like, this is stuff that's happening right now. Bacteria are evolving to resist all our drugs and all our cleaners. And that's a problem, right? Because now we don't have anything to kill them with. And by the time we figure out what to kill them with, they're going to evolve again. So if we could create a model that could predict these things, that would be amazing. And you would win the Nobel Prize probably. But again, no one's done that yet because it's hard. Okay, do we have any questions? How are you feeling about this? Type a 1 in the chat. Like, I'm gonna be able to do this. I can figure it out. Type a 2 in the chat. Like, what the heck did you just talk about? I have no idea. Which, you know what I'm going to tell you to do if you typed a 2. I'm going to tell you to watch this video again and then watch the other video. So the answer will be to watch a lot of videos. But 1.5, yeah. So once you get into it as well, it's going to be a little bit more, you know, understandable because you're going to follow steps. If you follow the steps, you'll be good. Okay, so that is it for today, guys. Does anyone, oh, you're getting a bonus point word for being here today. Which you can use on your evolution quiz or any evolution assignment that you would like. So write down that code word that I just typed into the chat, right? Feel free to add it to your evolution quiz. There are no retakes on that quiz because there's only so many questions. But if you do really poorly on it and you're freaked out about it, just send me an email and we'll talk about it. Keep in mind also that the population dynamics lab stuff, Chat is not visible in Zoom recordings, Colin. Yeah, actually, most of the things that I see for Zoom don't show up in the recording, which is why you guys probably always think I'm weird dealing with my windows, but it's because they're all on top of each other. Yeah, it's not visible. So nobody can see it unless you were here. So save that word and use it. Otherwise, if you have a question, email it to me. If you don't have a question, then that's it. Well, if you screen record your screen, then yeah, it'll show up. But if you record it through Zoom, it does not. So that would be the distinction. But if you want, I can record the chat. That's what you guys want. I don't know. All right. Anyways, you have the code word. That's how I'll know you were here. And I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks. I will send you a remote week. Have a good rest of your day.